Let's get started. So hello everybody. Again, my name is John Pozan. Excited for today's session. It's actually the first webinar we've ever done that is specifically about GP upgrades. And of course, because they happen quite often, this is something that I think will help quite a few people. I have with me today, Jason, if the technology gods are cooperating, maybe say a quick hello.
I'm here. Hello, everyone.
So Jason is going to be helping me explain some of the things that you must know about upgrading GP. Today's session is not going to be focused on the technical aspect of how to perform an upgrade, but rather it's going to focus on ensuring that you have all the information that you need to get through an upgrade successfully. Everything's from versions, how upgrades take place, and we're also going to talk about budgeting today. We have a tool that we're going to be releasing today for the first time, which I'm really excited about. We've been working on this quite a lot recently. So it's going to be a cost calculator, and we're going to be demoing that towards the end of the session, which will help you plug in the version that you're on right now and get an understanding of what a typical upgrade of your size should cost. And of course, this is just for budget reasons or budget, I guess, purposes. It's not an exact cost, but it gives you at least a little bit of guidance. So a few housekeeping items just before we get started here. See a few people joining. So number one, as always, we cannot hear you. So if you have a question or if you're having trouble hearing me or if we're losing you, please write that in as a question. There should be somewhere, I think, on the right-hand side of your screen, the ability to ask a question. So we'll have a look at those as we're going through the session, but we're going to come to them at the end. So feel free to write down questions anytime as they come to your mind, and we'll come back to them at the end. We're going to spend most of our time today talking about the upgrade process, how much it costs, what you need to know, what the big improvements are with each version. So it's not the typical session where we spend all of our time in GP. We're going to spend most of our time kind of going through those items. And as all of our sessions at the end, we're going to be doing some giveaways for Tim Hortons and Dunkin' Donut gift cards for those that are in the US. So with that, let's get rolling. So kind of the plan for today is I want to start out by, of course, talking a little bit about us. And for those of you that join every few weeks, I apologize that this is a bit repetitive, but I love you all the same for joining and listening to it. We're also going to be moving on to how to identify which GP version you're on. A lot of people seem to think that all that matters is the major version. So if you're on GP 2016, that's all you need to know. And that's not actually true. So we're going to talk about how to identify which version you're actually using and which version you're actually on, so that as we go through this upgrade planning and upgrade path, you get some insight into where you fall within that, so you can kind of plug yourself in and then go through the path accordingly. We also wanted to talk about the major enhancements with each version. We're going to go back to, Jason, was it GP 2013? Is that the first?
Yeah, well, I guess technically we're starting at 2010 and we're going to show the features that you would get going from 2010 to 2013.
Right. So we're just going to focus on the major highlights with each version. So if you're on GP 2010 and you want to know the big highlights in 2013, the big highlights in 2015, 16, 18, and so on, we're going to talk about those at a very high level. Those of you that have read a Microsoft upgrade guide before know that I think they release a 20-page document that goes through all the nitty-gritty. We're not going to get into those details, just the major items. We're then going to talk about the upgrade path for each of those versions. So as you find out your version, which we're going to start at, as I said, you can plug your version in and understand what the upgrade path would look like. Then we're going to end off with an upgrade checklist. So kind of a list of items to make sure that you have all lined up and ready to go. And finally, we're going to be giving the URL for the GP upgrade calculator, and I'm going to be doing a live example of how to use it and how to calculate how much it should cost. So that's what we have sort of in store for today. And then, of course, we'll end with, as always, the giveaways and any questions that you guys have. So who are we? We're a Dynamics GP partner. Some of you are on our GP 365 product, which is a software as a service model for GP. So it takes away sort of that upgrade process, right? We do that for you as part of the service. So most of the people, I'm just scrolling through the names here, that are on today's session probably aren't on GP365, or you probably wouldn't be here unless you're just super interested in GP and want to know what the upgrade looks like. But we do everything from typical implementations to upgrades. We do both on-premise installations as well as Azure, and actually migrations to and from. So sometimes the customer will start out on Azure and then they want to bring it on-prem, and the more common way is they're on-prem and they want to migrate to Azure. So we also do a lot of integration work, and of course we use a whole variety of different add-ons, from the popular add-ons like E1 Smart Connect and SmartLess Builder to binary streams add-ons. So we have familiarity with quite a few of them. So just before we move on here, I wanted to mention, for those of you who haven't been keeping sort of up to date with newsletters or even GP news, Microsoft recently released their roadmap, and this was kind of an exciting thing because they released a whole bunch of new features that are coming with GP 2018 R2, which is scheduled to be released in October. So for those of you that are thinking about upgrading, or you're in the midst of an upgrade, you might want to consider that in, few weeks, GP 2018 R2 will be out, and there is some really great features part of that. I'm not going to talk much about that, or I will sidetrack this meeting. So we'll move on. Last thing I wanted to say is, for any of you who aren't using us as your partner, we give 5 free hours each year to anyone who associates us as partner of record. So it's a great way of getting some free support, and you help us out a whole lot by doing it. So a big thank you for all the support, and anyone who needs anything, of course, we're always here to help you, whether you want to switch partner of record or not. We're here to help, and we appreciate the support. So with that said, let's move on to sort of how to find out your version. I'm going to pass this over to Jason. Don't be overwhelmed by all the different versions and RTM and SP1. Jason's going to clear all of that up.
There's a test at the end of the webinar, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
All right. So yeah, this chart, which I'm sure we'll make available as a blog in our on our website at some point soon, lists all the versions that are sort of out there going back to GP9. And actually at the bottom there where it says Dynamics Release 1.0 February 1993, that's actually Great Plains is what that should be labeled. So that's Great Plains version 1.0. That's before Microsoft even acquired the product. So that's sort of the history in total of GP and where it's come from. So you might notice at the top we have a legend there. So RTM is released to manufacturing. Basically, as a major version is produced and ready to be released to the public, they call that an RTM, a release to manufacturing. Because back in the old days, they used to produce CDs or DVDs with the media. Nowadays, it's all electronic and downloads, but they still call it RTM. MYTU, those are mid-tax year updates. There's also the year-end tax update, and in some cases a second year-end tax update, and that's going to update the payroll taxes primarily. So sales taxes are user configurable in GP, and you can just go and update the rates as needed. But with payroll, the tax tables are actually coded in GP itself. So both for Canadian payroll and US payroll, they release updates periodically throughout the year so that you can get those taxes updated. SP is a service pack, so that's generally a patch or a fix for some reason. And then finally, there's one that's not listed here, which would be R2, which is just release 2. So in between major versions, they'll often have a feature release, which they'll call R2 or R3 if there are 3. I don't think we've ever seen that with GP, but just to indicate that it is a feature release and not just a patch. So this shows the original date each release was released to the public, as well as the actual build numbers. So those long sequences of digits there and all the cells to the right of the date are the actual build number. This will tell you which version you're on exactly, like which exact version. So to find that out, there's 2 ways. One which is printed there on the right side of the screen. So when you launch GP and you're going to log in, on the screen that has your username and password on it, at the very bottom left of that window, there should be a long sequence of digits that matches one of these. If it doesn't, that means that you might be on a version earlier than 9.0, in which case you better call us, because that means you're really out of date. But if you're in GP and you want to see it, you don't need to log out. You can go to the help menu at the top and go about, and that'll bring up the about GP window, which will also have the build number indicated. So you can use this table just as a reference point to see where you are. And again, we'll publish this on our blog site in the upcoming days. So I think we can go to the next slide. One thing I wanted to mention, actually, you can stay on this slide, but if the version that you're not on is not supported, so right now support has ended for GP 2013. So if you're on GP 2013 or GP 2013 R2, there is no longer official support from Microsoft for that product. Now that means two things. One, it is possible to buy an extended support pack, which would put it out a few more years, and it's quite expensive actually to buy those. But what it usually means is that if there was a major problem that either you or your partner couldn't solve, you can't go to Microsoft and ask for them to help you with that problem. They'll turn you away at the door. So, especially if you're planning on doing any development or any major changes to the system, it's not advisable to be on an unsupported system. It's just not advisable at all, but especially if you're going to be doing any customization. So just bear that in mind. The next version, 2015, that's going to be supported through 2020, just to give you all a reference point. So these are the major enhancements, and again, there is a large article that we have on our website that details all, each version has usually 60 or 70 new features. We didn't list them all here. We've only listed the major features, so they're the things that would, drive you to want to upgrade. But in many cases, there are smaller fixes that might be very important to you as well. So I do encourage you to check those out. But just let's take a walk through these real quick. So if you're on 2010, this is what you would be getting. So you would accumulate all of these features, and that's what you would get if you went from 2010 to 2018 R2. So let's go one step at a time. So first, GP 2013, if you're upgrading from 2010, this was actually a major release. So this one was email integration. So you can actually email both sales order and purchase order processing documents directly from inside GP. So it connects to Exchange Server, or it can use Outlook on your local client, to send emails directly from GP. So that was a major feature. Another one that it seems like a small feature, but for any users of GP that go way back, or anybody that still has 2010, one of the major pain points everybody had was when you wanted to print a report, you had to choose the printer before you printed the report. Otherwise, you'd have to close it and go back into settings and find the right printer and then reprint the report. With 2013, they changed that so that you could actually choose the printer at the time you were running the report. Seems like it should have been that way to begin with, but again, GP is an older application. So back in those days, they had printers hard-coded. So that was a major feature that was released, as well as your subledger reconciliation. So they introduced, back then it was just payables and receivables management. Since then they've added bank reconciliation. But what it does is it allows you to run a routine in GP routines under financial that prints an Excel spreadsheet, or dumps all the information out to an Excel spreadsheet that attempts to match transactions in the subledger to the ledger. And usually you would run this report every month, and it will tell you if you're out of balance, and then it'll also indicate which transactions it believes put you out of balance. So it's broken into three sections: unmatched, which are the ones that it thinks are a problem; potentially matched, which means the amounts and dates line up, but they're not necessarily linked together; and then matched, which means that there's actually a link between the subledger and the ledger for that transaction. So it's a very helpful report that you can run starting in GP 2013. Now, when they brought out R2, they added some new stuff as well. So requisition management was one of the big ones. So this is a snap-on to the front end of purchase order processing, and it's intended to allow sort of non-financial users to create requisitions. So they don't use a full license. They use what's called an employee self-service license, which is much less expensive, and it allows them to indicate that they need to purchase something, which can then get routed through workflow, which is one of the other things in this release, so that it can be approved by a manager, say, and then finally go to a purchasing expert, and then go to accounting. So requisition management was added in R2. GL copy paste. So this allows you to take an Excel spreadsheet and copy and paste it into the general ledger. A lot of people love that feature. Workflow, it was enabled for, I think at the beginning, just project accounting, payroll, and I believe payables management initially, and of course requisition management. And that's just allows you to create approval steps or tasks based on criteria. An example would be if the purchase order exceeds $1,000, then it goes to approver A. If it's under $1,000, it goes to approver B. So it allows you to create those workflows so that you can put both a task management and approval system in place for those two series that they released initially. And the other one was document attach. So this allows you to attach documents directly onto transactions, and it's been enhanced over time, so it's quite robust now. Back in the early days, I think when they first released it, it was only available in purchasing and sales order processing, but it's been extended now, and it's in the general ledger and human resources and so on and so forth. So that was a neat feature as well. Taking to the next step, GP 2015, they enhanced the workflow system, so they added the general ledger, payables management, and receivables management. So now you can have workflows attached to GL transactions, as well as payables management and receivables management batches. So that's a very neat feature. Basically, you can put control amounts in and say if the batch exceeds this, then it needs to go to an approver, and if it's below, then it can be self-approving. Basically, you can create your own rules. They integrated Management Reporter as well in 2015. So that just basically means if you have 2015 R2 or higher, the drill downs in Management Reporter will function all the way down to the transaction level. And it's also more seamless for the what's called Data Mart, which is the database for Management Reporter for building reports. And they also transitioned to a service-based architecture. So this means that the back-end parts of GP were sort of redesigned so that they would work with web services, which allows you to transact and also to connect to GP using a web client, which of course came out very in 2013. And then 2015 R2, they brought out something cool, which a lot of people don't know is there, which is the all-in-one viewer for purchasing documents. So what it does is it brings up a screen. You can select search criteria, and it'll show you sort of based on a purchase order the entire history. So it'll show, here's the requisition, and it's a visual tool as well. It's really cool. So it shows here's the requisition, here's the purchase order that was created from it, here's the date it was received, and here's the receiving, and then finally here's the matched invoice. So it's just a visual way of sort of looking up your purchase orders inside of GP. And then again in R2 they enhanced the workflow again, so they added more features for the document attach, and so you could actually have an approval on a document attachment, so you could maybe force people to attach a document, sort of as a way to make sure you don't forget, as well as they added PM transactions. So in the previous release it was payables batches, now you could actually put approvals on the transactions themselves. Then we moved to 2016. So this was the web client redesign. So anybody that saw the web client prior to 2016 will recognize it as looking very much the same as GP did. That's because they had published it using a technology called Silverlight, which was a Microsoft web technology that was deprecated in 2016. So obviously they redesigned it and they did it in HTML5. And that had a whole bunch of advantages. First of all, it was much smoother, much faster. The old one was kind of glitchy, but when they redesigned it in HTML5, it was much faster and fewer glitches, as well as being mobile friendly. So that was a great feature. They also added document attached to the employee expense module, which completely makes sense. That's where you can attach your scanned receipts to the employee expense entry. They introduced Power BI integration. So we did a webinar, I think a few weeks ago, where we introduced Power BI content pack for GP. So if you missed that and you're interested, you can go back and see that webinar. It'll explain really how it all works. But essentially, it lets you snap in widgets on your GP homepage that are drawing information from Power BI. And then they did the same thing that they did for purchase orders, where you have the all-in-one viewer. They did that for inventory. So you could track, an inventory transaction from the receipt all the way to the sale in a visual way using that screen. In R2 of 2016, they made it possible to track and delete bank reconciliations. So it shouldn't say delete transactions. It's not reconciliations, it's transactions within a reconciliation. So they introduced the feature where you could track the history of your reconciliations, which you couldn't do previously. And they also enhanced the credit limit system for sales. So now it will take unposted cash receipts into effect, and it will also calculate payments in transit. And then now we're up to 2018. So the first release for that was SmartList password protection. That was cool. So that a lot of people create their own favorites in SmartList, and then somebody else will go in and delete it or modify it or change it. So now you could password protect your favorites. So you could still share them with people, but they wouldn't be able to delete them or modify them. They renamed all of so in older versions of GP, it used to be called, you would create a check batch. Now they call it Payment Manager to reflect more of the electronic side. Most people aren't cutting checks anymore. They're using EFT. So they renamed everything. Those are called payment records now rather than checks. Can still be a check, but it's just the naming. They enhance the inquiry windows, so there's more sort options and more filtering options on all of the major inquiry windows, transaction by customer, financial summary, financial detail, so on. They did more workflow enhancements, so now they've extended workflow out to master data as well, so vendors can be created through a workflow, and I think they've done the same thing on the customer side. And then improved Power BI integration. So this is when they released the content pack that I just mentioned. We did a webinar on a few weeks ago. And then R2, which is upcoming, so this is not a complete list, but just to give you an idea of what major functionality. So sales transaction workflow, so they're adding a new workflow for SOP. So that doesn't exist now. We have receivables transactions, but not SOP documents, and we'll be getting that in R2, as well as document attached Twain support. So for those of you that aren't techie, that means you can integrate a scanner into the document attach feature and scan directly from that document attach window. Whereas right now you'd need to go out to your scanner app, scan the document, save it on your PC, and then go into document attach and attach it from there. Now you'll be able to do that all from the document attach window. And then system enhancements. So this is mostly around passwords. They've extended the maximum length of passwords. They've given some more capabilities around password rotation and expiry and things like that. So we don't have complete visibility into R2, but that's what we know of so far. And again, that's coming out in a couple of weeks.
Awesome. And also, Jason, was the intelligence bridge part of R2?
It's supposed to be, but I didn't see anything official, so I didn't want to put it on the slide.
Got it. So yeah, I mean,
definitely that's coming up. Yeah.
Yeah. Since now I said it, I kind of feel like I have to explain it a little bit.
I think you do.
Yeah. So for any of you who have been reading or used Dynamics 365, there's a product called Business Central, which a lot of GP users have been wanting to sort of use. So they've basically released that they're going to be releasing a bridge that will allow you to use a lot of the Dynamics 365 Business Central functionality. So that's a webinar probably all on its own. So I'm going to hold off on getting into the weeds. Plus, it's not released, but that is something for any of you that have been looking for bridging the gap between GP and your Dynamics 365 or CRM system. So food for thought.
Absolutely. Okay, upgrade process explained. So along the top here, we have the various versions of GP and the requirements for the various backend architecture that are needed. So the paths are the little chart below. So these are sort of minimum paths that we've given. You can also go to each version, although I don't know why you would do that. But we wanted to point out that you can't go directly from GP 2010 to 2018. So you need to go from 2010 to 2013 to 2016 to 2018. So for each version that you have there, the path is listed. But you also need to bear in mind that if you're on SQL 2005, for example, or even if you're on older one like SQL 2000, you need to make sure that where you're upgrading to is a supported SQL Server, because you can't put GP 2013 on SQL Server 2005. You must go to 2008. So there's a lot to consider there. The other thing that's not indicated in this chart, but that I should point out, is that some of these SQL servers have minimum versions of Windows Server that they must run on. So that's another consideration as well. SQL Server 2008, I think, will run on Windows 2008 and higher, but won't run on earlier versions. So you're going to want to map everything out very carefully before you attempt to do this on your own. It is possible to do it on your own. Of course, we are biased, and we're going to say, well, you should call us, and we'll do it for you. But it is a lot of planning, and there is a lot of things to consider before you start. So this is the roadmap, the mapping for how you would accomplish the upgrade. And then the next slide, we'll talk about some of the considerations that you should be taking into account before you start. So first thing you should be checking to make sure is that you have an enhancement plan, because if you're not current on your enhancement plan, then you're not entitled to download the latest version of GP. So that's a starting point, is just make sure you're current and that you're supported by Microsoft. Then the next one is to confirm your version of GP, SQL, and Windows, which you can use the previous chart there to confirm. And then you need to look at add-on products. So this is something a lot of people overlook or neglect to do, is to make sure that all the add-ons, like maybe you have Smart List Builder or you have MICR from Akorma, you've got to make sure that they've already released an update for that version. For example, GP 2018 R2 is coming out next week. Usually it takes a few weeks for all the third parties to get their products updated and available online. So you're going to want to check to make sure. Now that wouldn't be a problem if you were going, say, to 2018 right now, because that's been out for quite a while, so it's a mature product. But if you're going to like the latest, greatest version, you want to make sure that all the supporting third parties are ready. You also want to check your reporting tools. So if you're on old versions of GP, you might be using FRX. That needs to be upgraded. It will no longer work as you migrate to the new versions. It was renamed Management Reporter in or around 2013. So you want to make sure that your reporting tools are going to support whatever version you're going to, and also have a plan to upgrade them if necessary. Another thing to consider is building a staging or development environment. This is very helpful, especially if you have old databases with tons and tons of data. A lot of people underestimate just how long these upgrades take. And I'm not talking about like actual labor, I'm talking about watching progress bars. So we have a couple of guys on our team, Mohammed comes to mind, who loves to spend his entire long weekends watching progress bars. He's done so many upgrades, and of course they need to be done after hours usually because there's very little tolerance for business outage. So you got to plan it very carefully. So why we recommend a staging environment is it'll give you an indication as to how long the upgrade process will take. It also gives you a chance to practice. If you're doing this on your own and you're not experienced, I highly recommend you do it in a staging environment first, because you can get yourself into a position in production where you break something and you can't go back unless you really know what you're doing. So you need to be very careful. And the other thing to consider with that is if you're on 2013 and you go to do an upgrade to, say, 2016 on your own, if anything goes wrong, because you're coming from 2013, Microsoft will not help you. So you need to make sure that you're on a supported platform if you're going to do this by yourself. Or I would at least get somebody that knows what they're doing to get you to a supported version, and then you could take it from there. And then finally, are you going to need to do any training? So one great thing about GP is that they kind of keep things very consistent looking. So the workflow in terms of daily interactions with GP doesn't change significantly from version to version. But if you're going from, for example, GP8 to GP 2018, that's going to cause some confusion for your users. And I would strongly recommend, in that case, having a staging environment so that you can show them, the changes to the interface, so they understand how to navigate properly, just to give them comfort, so they know, where to go do their cash receipt on Monday morning when they come in after the upgrade. So you're going to want to consider whether or not you need to do training. And I think that's about it for the checklist.
Yeah, I'll mention too, by the way, as Jason said, we will be releasing this as a blog like we do all of our webinars, so it'll be posted into the resources section. But if any of you are like right about to do an upgrade and you need this checklist or something else that is in one of the slides, just email me, and then we can send it over to you as soon as possible. By the way, Jason, something interesting. So when you were making fun of Mohammed, he's actually on the webinar, and
I know he is.
Oh,
yeah.
And when you were saying that, he went offline like right after. It was really funny. Related, but okay. So now is the time that I'm going to take everyone here on a spin through the GP upgrade calculator that we've created. So this is the first time we've released it, and just to quickly draw your attention, Jason, what do you think of that graphic I made above the G? Is it good or? Okay, we're gonna move on. We're gonna move on. All right, so here it is. So the first thing to pay attention to is the GP 365 URL at the top. So this is going to be on our website eventually, but it's not yet. So if you are interested in using the calculator right now, please pay attention to this link. I'll send it out to maybe in the chat or something afterwards, but it's gp365.ca/GP-calculator, a bit long. Okay, so here's the deal. Here's how you use it. So the first thing is this is designed, again, to give you a high level estimate. It's just the caution at the top. So each of these questions that we're asking kind of play into how we're calculating your estimated upgrade cost. We've done a lot of these and we put a lot of effort, or I should say Mohammed put a lot of effort into making sure that this algorithm does a pretty good job of calculating. Now, the quote that it's going to spit out at the end is what we would consider a time and material quote versus a fixed price quote. So that's always something to be very certain of just before I go any further. So if you guys are getting a quote from another partner or us, always make sure that you find out, is the quote fixed price? If it is, then as you know, it will ultimately mean that your price won't change. So you know exactly what to expect. If it's time and material and it seems really low, you could be in a situation where it ends up being a lot more than what you've been quoted. And I can tell you that many times, probably 50, we've had opportunities to quote out an upgrade and we've lost the business because another partner quoted something time and material. It ended up being a whole lot more than they quoted, and then the customer ended up coming back to us. So please make sure that the quote you've received is fixed price unless you aren't overly worried about cost. So let's go through. First question. How many Dynamics GP licenses do you have? So if you're not sure how to find that, each of these questions have a tip. So if you click this little tip here, it'll walk you through sort of how to find that. And of course, if the tip doesn't help, it's not a good enough tip, just shoot us an email and we'll help you through it. So we'll say that we have 5 GP licenses or 5 licensed users. Next, we'll move on to what is the number of companies that need to be upgraded. So again, if you're not sure how to find that, here's a little tip. In this case, we'll say that we have 3 companies within GP, separate companies that each have their own database, so to speak, that need to be upgraded. Actually, you know what? We'll say 2, just for fun. The next one is, which version of GP are you on? So the way we've done this for simplicity is we didn't put in all the version codes. We sort of did an algorithm that would give us a pretty good idea without knowing the exact version. So you can select whichever version you're on. For the sake of this example, we'll say that you're on GP 2015. The next one is, what is the total size of your SQL database? Sorry. So this one may be something that's maybe a bit more tricky. So if you have multiple companies, you're going to have multiple databases. So what you need to do is log in to each company and perform this step. And then you can enter how many gigs the database is. So in this case, we're going to say total of 12 gigs. What type of reporting tool is in use? So if you're not using either Management Reporter, FRX, or if you're using something that's not either of these, you can just select none. We'll say that we're using FRX just to add a bit more cost into this. Scroll down, do you want training on the new version? So this is just, again, something to consider. Most people, I would say, would have between 2 and 5 hours. If you have a really large group of people, you might want to break it up into a couple sessions, so maybe the 10-hour would come into play. For the sake of this example, it's a pretty small install, we'll say 2 hours. So then you're going to enter your name, and yes, this will send to us as well, but no, we're not going to harass you constantly, at least. So enter your name. We'll pick on a good friend of mine, Austin Matthews, who really isn't a good friend of mine, but I wish he was. All right. And then your company phone number. So the one thing I can promise you is that if you fill this out, I am not going to phone you and harass you. When you click calculate your cost, you'll notice at the bottom, your estimated upgrade cost will show. So something that is also interesting is we will email you this cost as well as all of the options that you selected. So a bit of a pro tip here, if you're interested now that you've sort of unlocked the calculator by entering your details to know, hey, I wonder how much it would cost to go from 2013. So you can play around with it and it'll actually update your cost live so that you don't have to keep submitting a new form. So if you want to play around with different options to try and understand how much it's going to cost, you can do that without sending yourself and us 500 emails. So again, please go check this out. It's a really cool tool. If anything, it can be used to sort of price check your current partner. If they're giving you a fixed price quote, it's likely going to be definitely more than this. Or whatever is shown here, as this is more of the time and material basis, but at least it gives you a foundation of what the average upgrade will cost based on us doing hundreds of upgrades over the years. So I hope this tool is of use. Jason, anything to add there, if you're still there?
No, I just feel sorry for Austin because now you're going to call him.
Yeah, you know what I was just thinking? I hope that's not his actual email, or he's going to be like, what is GP? I hope no one holds me being a Leaf fan against using us as a partner as well. All right, let me just switch this around. Okay, so the last few things here to finish up is our next events. So the next event is on October 18th, and this is one that was requested by a whole bunch of people, which is an intermediate management reporter course. So we're going to be covering consolidations. And actually, Jason, you're going to be doing that one. Are you ready? No? Okay. You got time. You got a little time. We have 16 spots or so left as of, when did I check? A few hours ago. So sign up if you're interested. The next event, I actually meant to insert a poll here, but I didn't do it. So instead, what we're going to do, we're going to go with the flow. If anyone has an idea for what they would like, please email us, info@gp365.ca. We want to hear what you guys ultimately want us to cover. We've covered, I think at this point, 20 or 30 topics, but we want to turn it back to you. So if there's something you're interested in, please let us know, and we'll add that to our upcoming webinar list, as long as there's enough interest. And like all of our webinars, or pretty much all of them, we post them to the blogs or resources section of our GP365 site. So the URL is at the bottom there. So if you missed a webinar, like our last webinar on Power BI, which was really popular, so if you didn't get a spot or you couldn't make it or whatever, go watch that video. We cover the content pack for GP. And it was a really cool webinar, and one that I think everybody will find interesting if you didn't attend. So yeah, let's move on. Okay, so
I do see a question, John. So maybe if you want to let me address that first.
Sure.
I'll pick up the phone here so you don't have to deal with my speakerphone. Okay, so the question that we received is, if we are moving to a new server, is there anything special we need to do? And I'm glad somebody asked that question, because actually, yes, there is. It's not simply a matter of moving the databases over to a new SQL server. And if you are taking an upgrade path that requires you to upgrade your SQL server, then we do strongly recommend performing what we call a migration upgrade, which would mean bring up the new infrastructure, the new SQL server, and upgrade it on the new server. So there is some additional steps. Now these are fairly technical. They're SQL scripts and things like that, so I'm not going to get into them now. But if you want to email us after the call, we can empower you with the scripts that you would need so that you can relocate those databases to a new server.
Awesome. I like that word, empower you.
Empower. Yeah.
That's nice. Any other questions?
That's the only one I see.
All right. So before we move on to the giveaways and we wrap up today's session, a bit of a shorter one, I just wanted to do a bit of a shameless plug here. So for any of you guys that have a Google account and don't mind leaving us a review, I just wanted to stress how important and how much we appreciate it. So if you Google Atum Corporation, you'll see our our little posting there. If you can write us a review and just let everybody know how much you like these sessions, or if you didn't like them, I guess write that too. Jason might cry, I might cry, but we'll get over it. That is hugely appreciated. So a big thank you to everybody for joining, listening, and staying till the end. Let's give away 3 gift cards. So the first one is going to Jill S. The next one is going to Jeff M. And the third one is going to Raphael M. So if any of those names are yours, you will hear from me tomorrow or Monday at the latest with your gift card. So Jason, thank you. Really appreciate you explaining everything. And thank you to all of you. Have a great Thursday, and we'll see you guys in a couple of weeks. If you need anything, there's my email.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate the attention.